A special called meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers franchise. The Board of Trustees to order at 6:46 p.m. on November 12, 2020. Board members, district staff members, and members of the audience, you are free to join me in standing as the Pledge of Allegiance is led by Guillermo Ramos and the Pledge of the Texas flag by Randy Shackman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
As a district, we dedicate all our efforts and resources to our goal of high expectations for all. The board uses this goal to guide all deliberations, decisions, and actions. You will get to see all deliberations, decisions, and actions of the board in open session, with the exception of some items which may be discussed in a closed session as stipulated in the Texas Government Code, Section 551, commonly known as the Open Meetings Law. These items typically deal with personnel matters, consultation with our attorney, and real estate. For the record, the board members present are Tara Korbachik, John Matthews, Sally Derrick, Randy Shackman, Guillermo Ramos, and Nancy Klein. We constitute a quorum and may conduct business on behalf of the district. The next item is audience for guests, item number 2. Per Board Policy BED Local, comments will only be accepted for items on the posted agenda. Do we have anyone wishing to speak at this time? So, seeing none, we'll move ahead on to item number 3. Non-action items for discussion. Equity and Equality Strategic Plan. Dr. West, you're smack in the middle. That's great.
And let me start this off just real quick. And so, you know, we've had some conversations about restorative discipline. We've had a lot of conversations on, you know, what are we doing in CFBISD to get equity and equality. That's where we have to first start. What is equity and what is quality? And Dr. West will walk through those. But what we want to do tonight, you have a chart in front of you. You see some colored circles, and then on the second page, you're going to see by year, 2018, 2019, and 2020. And then we're going to talk through how much work we've actually done to move this forward. Even though we're not always talking about it, it takes a lot of committees, hundreds of people on these committees, and this is the work that we're producing ultimately to do one thing, to educate all children. All children have an opportunity. All children are considered equal. And so we're going to spend some time on that then turns into some of the pieces that the board has asked. It's not just one little facet, not one little grain of how do you educate or how do you reduce discipline. There's a whole lot more to it. That's one of the reasons why in 2018 we brought educating the whole child. There was so many components that we weren't doing, and how could we do them if we weren't meeting their basic needs first and then walking through the other components to be a part of that. And so we'll talk a little bit about the different committees, those processes, what we've done, and then where we're going in the future. Dr. West.
Thank you. I first wanted to start off with just a reminder of grace. I have to give myself that reminder sometimes because this is a new district and a new job in a pandemic. And what was impressive to me about CFBISD when I joined was all of the many great things that people have done and that Dr. Chapman and you all as a board have led. And so the first thing that I think it is important to take a look at is that first chart, which is the strategic equity steps in closing the opportunity gap. Dr. Chapman and I didn't know each other until this year, and again, what a way to meet each other in a pandemic. And so as we work together, and as I've had an opportunity to see the work that has been done, it's pretty impressive. If you look at year 1, and I won't read all of those to you, but I do want to talk about how the things that he and the team have done have led us to a place that Sally and I were speaking today, and I said I'm very excited because after as these 3 years have built up, we're really to a place that I feel like that we're going to see momentum that will be huge for our students and family. In year 1, you notice that there's professional learning communities there, along with other things. But it's important, if you're going to make a difference in anything, that it's not just us. In fact, sometimes I say that to the folks that I work with, is we can be in a meeting all day. We can sit here and talk about all of our initiatives and all the things that we want to do, or the ways that we're going to do things. But if the work that we talk about and do never gets to the classroom level, then nothing really happens. We've just had a meeting. So that's what I love about professional learning communities, is that at our campuses, that our teachers and our principals are involved in sitting down, making plans, talking about the best ways to educate our scholars. Professional learning communities are key. Then in year 2, it looks like a very busy year. Lots of great things in year 2. I want to point out that in year 2, that the social emotional learning piece, that is also a large piece for whether you're going to work with your students and close gaps. And it's important because everyone needs to feel safe in order to learn, and everyone needs to have their needs met in order to learn. So not only is the social emotional learning piece important there, but you also know about Giving House and the way that we feed our children. All of those basic needs definitely need to be met before you can even begin to think about academics. There's also the restorative teams, and I'm going to talk a little bit more to you about restorative practices. I know a lot of times when people hear about restorative, they hear it with the word discipline. But actually, restorative is larger than that, and it's about a practice. And it is back to, as I was speaking about the professional learning communities, it's about a belief and how all of the adults work together to make a difference. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But just the addition of the chiefs of school leadership is huge in there. It's very important because and Dr. Hamlin's here tonight. He's one of our chiefs of school leadership. Why that is important is because they are definitely, their role is boots on the ground in our schools. And they are also leading a very important initiative that is in the 2021, which is the data-driven instruction piece. And I will talk more about that too. I'm not going to read anything out of these books to you, but these are some very important books right now in CFBISD, and one of them is driven by data and that initiative that our chiefs are leading. Then in 2021, lots of work there. I did want to go back and point out the restorative practices, the work that's being done. When I said restorative discipline, which is what a lot of people are familiar with, sometimes that people, when you hear about it, you'll hear about these circles and about there's somebody already in trouble, and then a lot of people come together, the parents, the principal, a big team comes together in order to restore a relationship so a student can go back into a class. While that is important, and it's definitely a part of restorative practices, there's a lot more that goes into that than just the very end. Because restorative is also about teaching the people that lead in schools, the principals, the teachers, it's about culture, about how we treat each other. And so it starts all the way on one side about just affective statements for people saying what they feel and how they want things to be within a classroom. One of the examples in this book talked about when a teacher, the students were acting up, and the teacher said, "I've worked really hard on this lesson, and it hurts my feelings that it's not going well." just some of those kinds of things humanize education and show the students that we work hard and we care about you and we put a lot into this. So it goes all the way from those kinds of things to small impromptu conversations, to those circles that they're not just reactive, but they're also proactive circles, and formal conferences. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I was in a WebEx meeting with our assistant principals who are being trained right now on restorative practices. And it was really great for them to hear. I jumped in at the end of the second day. I've been in the whole first day, but jumped in at the end of the second day, and I was able to hear from how they started the first day to the end of it, when they were talking about how they were really excited about this work in our schools because of what it would do to restore relationships, so that students can focus on education and so that teachers can focus on education as well. So this is important, and all of these things come together. All of these pieces come together to create the kind of culture that you all have built in CFBISD that makes it a place where we can make a difference. So this next sheet, this one that looks like that, at the top of it, it says Equality and Equity Task Force. And I just want to remind you that the other night when I was talking to you about your House Bill 3 board goals and the work that we're doing there, that as we are working on curriculum and instruction and assessments, that we're looking at everything that we're doing through the eyes of equality and through the eyes of equity. And equality means access. Does everybody get the access to whatever it is that they need? And then equity is about then that support, and do people get support? So as Dr. Chapman and I were talking about the work and how all of these things that are moving pieces and parts to support our students, how do we then take all of these things, and we knew we had all of these different groups that care about our kids, that are working on equity and working on equality and doing good and great work in our district. How do we start to formalize that and make it something that we're not separate circles? As you see on this, it looks very separate. So that overall arching group up here is a group that we're putting together that would be the Equality and Equity Task Force, and will include at least one person from each of these groups, and probably more, because I'm certain, probably he knows them all, but I'm certain that we've probably missed somebody in some group that's working together for our students. But we want to take all of this work, we want to take the people from this work, and we want to put them together on a task force, add more people from the community, and ensure we have representation across our entire district, so that as a task force at the top, we can make sure that everybody's sharing. Because what we envisioned when we talked about this, was that the AVID group, as they're working, we'll talk to somebody on the student, or hear what the student impact team is doing and say, oh, we're doing something similar, or we could help in this way. That's a place where we feel like we'll get a huge movement. Equality and equity are the lens within which we're looking through all of our work, everything that we do. I also, another part of what we're doing is data. We've brought on, and that's in one of the pieces on the 2020. There's a lot of data already that we collect in this district, but that's what we've noticed, or one of the things that I've noticed is we have a lot of data, but it is about whether we're using that data in order to make impact for our students. So not only are we talking about equity and equality as we work, we're also making sure that every time when we have meetings, that we say, well, where's the data? How do we know that we're getting better or that we're getting worse? Just today in the training that the principals were working on with data-driven instruction, they were talking about the two important questions of how do we know if our students are learning and what do we do if they don't? And that's the piece that second piece is the one that we're all of these groups need to work together on, because we do know we have examples of we know that they aren't doing better, and we want to make sure that they're doing better. Another important piece of what I always look through as all of the folks that I work with, I've met with every single one of the directors that I work with, and on every single one of them, we met about budget, because it's also very important that as you have all these programs and you have all these groups and you have all these things, not only are you looking at the data to see if you're getting better or not, you look at how you're spending your budget and how you're spending your money. Because, and what I've said over and over in those budget meetings to folks is, the budget isn't just about what you had last year and how you move it over to this year and that you're going to do the same things. If we're going to make a difference for our students, then we have to make sure that we have the money in the right places and that we're leading for the right things. You don't get your budget and then decide how you're going to spend it. You lead. You talk about how you're going to, what the work is that you need to do. You lead, and then you make sure that your money is in the right places so that you have the money to fund, so that you can use those resources in order to make a difference for students. You notice that there's a couple of extra on this. There were two that were intentionally left off. Not that 2 is any magic number, and we'll probably end up with more circles on that. But Dr. Chapman and I we wanted to also hear your thoughts and ideas about, as you look at this and you know the work that has happened over the last 3 years, and as you look at these different groups, and maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you aren't, but knowing that these folks are all working on equity and equality kinds of things. There's also those 2 extra circles. What other kinds of things would you want to see, or are you thinking about that's important to you all as a board for the work that we do? Do you have things that you would add into those circles?
And one of the things that I want to mention is that, so in the last legislative session, the 86th legislative session, they passed House Bill 3. You had to have House Bill 3 goals. And in those, they had early childhood, right? They're very important, pre-K. We started funding pre-K. So in 2017-18, we were serving a little under 400 children. Well, what is one of the equal level playing fields? Getting kids in our building as fast as we can so they can be reading on grade level by 3rd grade, right? So we already started that process in 17 and 18. And we moved that up to almost 800. Then we went to 1,100. We have 2,000 students per grade level. So pushing that envelope. You started doing that in 17 and 18, not whenever the legislation made a bill. Then you start talking through CCMR. Why is it that if you're not going to Turner and you're a part of X, or to Smith a part of Y academies, or you're going to early college high school and there's 67 kids getting an associate's degree, we have 2,000 graduates a year. Why are we not thinking outside the box and adding more for our students? And Joe Gillen and her team has done an exceptional job. And they've already moved that number from X amount of industry certifications to Y, because we were already starting to work through these processes and procedures as we move forward. The the legislature said you had to start building goals. They told you this when? In March, April. Guys, you started working on CB 2030 back last September, the September before legislation even met. And so you're moving through all of these works on how we can get better and moving our children to the next level. But if you've been an educator, you know, why do children act out? Why do children drop out of school? Why do children do X and they don't get an appropriate education? Because you don't meet their basic needs. Why can we go back and look at commit? And Dana and I met with Dottie Smith on commit, and she's like, 8 years, 9 years, this population has never improved. What did y'all start doing last year to get some numbers, some growth with kids? It's simple. You met their basic needs. You met their basic needs. And then you've got robust instruction with those children, and those children are going to perform, and they're going to start to learn because they're loved and they're cared for and their needs are met. So what other ideas do you guys have that we can add to this circle as we continue to move this work forward? Because this work is vital. Guys, we have 66%, 67 now, percent of our kids are economically disadvantaged. Do they have a device? Yep. Do they get to have a good education? Yes. Do they get a breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day? Yes. If they have an essential need that they don't have at home, do they get it at school? Yes. Within 24 hours? Yes. Do we serve over 800 families in our social and emotional needs through our counseling services every day? Yes. Do we provide their families with those needs? Yes. Just keep going down the list and checking the box. You've been doing that all along. So what else can we add to this to continue to move that forward? And then you can look at all pieces. If it's restorative discipline, again, that's just a little grain of where we're going and what are we trying to do. How can we continue to move that forward? Who needs to be at the table that we can talk to keep pushing that envelope forward? I'm just passionate about this, by the way.
Board members, any discussion? Mr. Scheckman?
Dr. Chapman, admin folks, as a group, we share that passion. We really do. I am not just impressed, I'm excited with what we've gotten done. I am anxious about how much farther we have to go, but we're going to get there.
And what COVID does to
Yeah,
this
I'm
year.
confident we're going to get there. My thought process is that this is a work in progress. And I don't know that I'm in a position right now to say, well, we should have this idea in this circle, but I would encourage me and all of us as a board and admin to continue this routine discussion, and at the same time to be thinking about what are the steps that can go in there and make that happen. And so I hope to walk away from tonight not just being encouraged about what we've accomplished, excited about what we are going to do, but challenged to say, over the next few days, weeks, and months, what are the pieces to go in there? So,
And there's one in here we missed too, with health, telehealth, Joe and her team worked through that. Sandra with giving vaccines to kids. We're not sending them away. We're giving them a vaccine and you go right into the classroom immediately. There's a whole piece there that's not even mentioned in here. So there may be some things that you may know, hey, can we bring this to the table? What else can we do to make sure we're educating those children? And I promise you those scores are going to go up. I promise you they're going to go up. I promise you discipline's going to go down.
So I have a question, because I know our district is not unique in its makeup. We look like other districts in the state and in the country. Who are those districts we should be looking at that have had success with, touching those populations that have been the hardest ones to capture and fill those gaps? Because there's someone out there that's done this work. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Who can we be looking to?
I'm not familiar with any whole districts, and that doesn't mean they don't exist. What I do know is there are pockets of where special schools or special attention is paid, and then achievement increases. But what we want to be is we don't want to be like one special school or one special, little group. But we want to learn from those, and we want to do what they do, and that's why I think it's really this is really important and powerful work that's already been done, because there's a whole bunch about systems and processes to make sure nobody falls through the gap, and that's what the important piece is. And Randy, just a moment ago when you were talking about you're not sure who else would go in the circle, that's why it's important for all of us to continue to think who else needs to be at the table, to just make sure that no systems or processes are missed.
And so one thing, to answer your question, there's not necessarily, one district that is doing things through the roof, just knocking it out of the park. One of the things that and I said this whenever you interviewed me almost 3 years ago, is that, guys, I always go and look and listen and I find what other districts are doing. Why do you think there's so many items here that we're going to keep, coming up with? I share. If it's good for kids, I'm sharing with others. If you're doing something great, I'm going to go talk to you and I'm going to go sit down and John Chapman's personally go talk and see, what are you doing to make this work? How can we get better at this? And so I don't think there's that. There's a lot of districts that have something very similar to it. I almost wanted to show and brag, just look at ours and look at theirs, but that wasn't very nice. But the reason being is because if we find it and it's working, we have our meetings and we go, how can we make this happen? How can we do this today in CFB and hopefully not even cost us any money? Which a lot of that, this is federal dollars, this is private dollars that at work. And so we weren't having to break the bank, for our budget to move forward. Some of the things, technology, obviously, in 17, 18, 18, 19, we had to furnish. And I know some of you are going, oh my gosh, we haven't spent this much money in years, and what are you doing? There's a system, there's a process to why we did what we did.
Every time as I've been meeting with folks over the last here's an example. Yesterday I met with folks about our testing, and I said we just need to really be real clear about all the many tests and assessments and formative kinds of tests that we do in our district, and then who pays for that. Does a student pay for their own test in order to get that college credit, or are we paying for it? Who gets the data? Do the students get their data so that they can work on it and get better? Do the parents, are they apprised of and know how to work with a student to get better? Do the teachers get that data and actually know how to work on it? And then the other thing is that I've asked about is who benefits. And when I'm asking about who benefits, it's back to that equity and equality item. Because as we start to look through these things, sometimes I hear of, well, we pay for this particular SAT prep, or we do this or that, but it only benefits a certain group. And so that is one of the areas that I feel that I'm really excited about our equity and equality task force, is because we're gonna be, Sally, we're gonna be that place that everybody else is looking to, because we've got all these pieces and parts, but we're gonna be organized and systematic and process about how we put them together. And I think that's what people haven't done, is make sure that they go back to the data and go, is it working? Is it not? Who's paying for it? Asking those questions of all of these people.
Is this equality and equity task force already in place?
So we have the main task force in place. So what we decided to do, and Dr. West and I were talking about this, there's a lot of work within those independent ones that we want to honor their work and continue to move those works and plans, so then to bring in a member or two from each one of those to be a whole. That way they can then report on, well, we're doing this, well, oh my gosh, so like you just said a minute ago, so are you. So then how can we bring that as a whole? And that's where we've seen a gap, because they're not all talking to each other. And they've all got their little plans and they're all working here, but we got to do this district-wide, not just in your isolated group.
On the actual task forces, are there any members already that are on the
Yes,
task
sir.
force?
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Can we know who they are? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. I can get some that I don't have them. I don't have memorized.
Okay.
One thing the board, go ahead, dear.
So I won't, similar to what Randy said, I won't presume to know what all of our gaps are. I know they exist now, and while I think we've made, like Dr. Chapman said, progress over the years. I guess I want to make sure that these teams aren't focusing on gaps that they think might exist but don't. And so I kind of want to, so what I think I hear is that each of these circles are doing their own investigation, survey, etc. However, they're going to determine what those gaps are, and they're working on their own processes and procedures to close those gaps. Am I right so far?
They are, but that's exactly what we want to do, is we want to capture all that. We want to honor the work and find out who, and honor their work and see that they're really making a difference. But we
Because
want
they are.
Right, but we want to pull it together with that umbrella of we got to close this discipline gap. We got to close this academic gap. We got to close and make sure that all of these people are also they know that their work has to be invested towards. You got to close. We're going to close these gaps.
So it's
in
going
a
to
big
flow
way.
up and direction flow down as far as direction, or is it more it flows up and then it kind of flows out to everybody, kind of a shared practice?
So you're like your little bubble, you are the specialist in that area.
Okay.
So you're reporting the works that you're doing. It's not from the top saying you will go do this now. Now, one of the pieces that I've also seen, and I cannot stand it, when we talk about we're doing great things here with this, this, and this, I'm like, love it, that's great, but show me the data. Show me the data that is showing that increase, and that's one of the gaps that we've had. And then I go back and I get a third party to look at it and say, all right, tell me how we've grown in this capacity. And I'm like, you haven't. Okay, I need data to show and prove that the works we're doing and all these people are doing, that we're actually doing great benefits for kids. And that's where we're then bringing in that data piece to say, show me how you're moving it, use data to support the actions, plans, process, and procedures that you have in place to move that.
That's what that task
Yep.
force will
Yes.
kind of bring it together and then
Yes.
not direct their actions, but say, here's where you need to be.
And then
And
you
what you're
two,
doing.
how are you talking? You're almost working on the same plan. How can we bring you two together in that conversation where they're really and truly? That's the whole reason we put bubbles, because you're kind of in your own bubble. That's,
Well,
it
We
is.
think we're funny.
I thought we were. They didn't.
well, and so will the task force themselves determine, okay, is the task force making a difference? I mean, I've said before, I mean, we cannot create another group that is checking a box. We cannot do it. I mean, some of these are volunteers, but staff don't need to be a part of that. They've got 25,000 other things on their list, and community members. And so I guess, is the task force going to decide what success looks like, or is it going to be kind of an intermittent success because it's not going to be perfect tomorrow?
Who's on the task?
Right?
It's staff, right?
It's all staff. Yeah, these are all staff. Is that what you-
Well, aren't there community volunteers? Well,
On
I
the
guess
DIC.
the individual
Yeah.
might be staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
The DIC has community members,
Right.
represented.
Well, again, I don't want to check a box.
Nope.
committee.
I
I mean,
disagree.
it's got to make a difference. We know the gaps are there
They're
and what it
most
is. And so,
definitely.
and then how are we going to hear about what
About
movement or success looks like?
Because of those scores that have come out and because of those gaps, I mean, I would almost think we should revisit this quite a bit, maybe once a quarter. I mean, they're there, we gotta close it.
I'll disagree.
I know what I'm saying, I think it almost needs to be something that we revisited once a quarter.
And it seems, and I'm excited that we are getting more of a handle on connecting data to plans for achievement. And at some point, and I know with COVID and all the stuff we've got out there, but we were talking about the development of a dashboard that would give us the opportunity. I think that's in progress.
It is.
Is it getting close or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because that would help us to be able to connect to the data a little more, and we'll see the data so we can identify then where in the bubbles that data fits and where it fits in the whole overall Because, you know, again, for the first time since I've been a part of the board, we actually designed the 2030 plan and the goals to get there, and I'm anxious to see our continued movement of growth towards achieving those goals.
Totally agree.
And then, and Tara, to your point about the equity and equality task force, that's what the common thread will be, because just like Dr. Chapman said, all of these folks are doing work, and and I'm sure it's all amazing work, but trust and verify. And so the part of the verification process needs to be about us, you all, looking at that data, because as I said at the beginning, when I was talking about our meetings, when I'm working with the chiefs or the assistant supes, we can meet all day and talk about the best plans, but if what we do doesn't end up with action and doesn't end up with the desired outcome, then all we did was talk about a bunch of plans. So we don't want to just check a box, and we don't want to just talk about a bunch of plans. We want this group to start pulling this together so we can see that something is happening. And yes, you deserve a dashboard. We all do, and most importantly, our kids do.
Dr. West, can you elaborate more on restorative practices, secondary implementation, or Dr. Chapman, and restorative teams? There are two different bullets, so how do they work together, or are they separate programs, or?
Did we put them on two different bullets?
Yeah, 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
they were 1, 2, 3, fourth and fifth.
Okay, so with restorative practices and with restorative practices teams, it's really the same work, but the teams are where we at each of the campuses. There has to be a restorative team. There has to be somebody, a group of people that are always looking to make sure that as discipline happens, as things happen, that there can be somebody that can run the circles and can do the work. But just restorative practices in general is the training and the support that we need across the entire district, because of the fact that because restorative isn't, like I said earlier, it's not just that you got in trouble, something happened, and you have to have restoration to get back into your classroom. It really is about a mindset. So the restorative practices kind of training that we'll do, it will be with teachers, it will be with assistant principals, it will be with a lot of different people. But there are actually people that when you run a circle, that there's certain protocols that you follow. And not every teacher has to know every bit of that.
So is this year's stuff kind of hard right now?
You know,
I don't know if I'm going to say it's hard. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that are constantly shifting. The hard part is, yes, because then you've only got about 50% of them are remote and 50% are traditional. That's the hard part, in having that at hand, and having your staff that are working harder and longer than they've ever worked before in their entire lives. So is that piece? Absolutely. And so when we start talking about other things, I could tell today when we were talking in a principal meeting, we're talking about how we're moving forward. Yeah, how we're moving forward with charter schools and how we're going to combat this with 2 new firms. And I know they're back in their head going, are you kidding me? I'm just trying to worry about kids in the classroom and kids virtual right now. But we can't stop moving, and we have to keep moving things forward if we're going to get better and better each and every day. And the things that I always illustrate or talk about is 1 month lost of education is 1 month gone forever. And so when do you start continuously moving that? When are we going to start thinking about educating that whole child? When are we going to start just, I'm going to tell you, this has been a practice and it eats me up, is whenever a child acts out, well, you're going home and going to OSS, out of school suspension for 3 days. Are you kidding me? There's other processes, unless if you meet a certain chapter 21 threshold, then you may meet that. But why are we just sending them home? What are they doing at home? Nothing. And so what processes are we taking? So unfortunately, we're having to build all these pieces as we move forward, and thank goodness that's why we have Dr. Hamlin And he's helping that on that secondary level to build a new norm for our children. And again, people forget that you have a very small group of kids that are affluent Anglo children in CFB. A very, very small group.
I smiled when you said, "Is this hard?" Because I don't even know, because it's been pandemic since I've been here. But I think the part that's hard about it is there's so much to be done, and we are so excited about it. And but there's a lot about getting people together and talking and getting the data, and then you look at a classroom and people are really working hard just to figure out traditional and remote. That's what makes it hard, is there's a lot of new learning that goes on in a pandemic that doesn't have this is I love to talk about this because this is regular work. This is the stuff I love to do. Pandemic work, not so much.
And then you have just a large number of quarantines that happen literally in minutes.
Right.
And you have two campuses, Blaylock and Long, that are now, virtual for 5 days. I mean, yeah, that's a task. And teachers are having to switch immediately and start going a different route, so sure.
And I think with our most disadvantaged kids, it makes the year hard for them also.
100%.
And we want them not to lose ground, but it's so hard right now with the
Oh, yeah,
challenges, the obstacles.
You should see state numbers, meet with the commissioner weekly, and look at where we are, where we compare to the state. Hands down, we're gonna show those comparisons because we are doing very well considering the state. I'll compare you to Dallas ISD scores, and let's look at where we are. And again, this is based on map data, but we're doing very well. Hence why one of the reasons I want to continue to push to have the star in April, and I'm one of the few superintendents out there that is wanting to do so. I need to see where we are as we keep moving this work forward. If we're behind, we know we are, but we've got to keep moving that forward. We can't let a situation of worldly pandemic stop us, because those kids keep getting older by the day.
Where do extracurricular activities fit in? I mean, I've always been a strong proponent, I think all extracurricular activities, greatly enhance the overall educational process. As an administrator, year in and year out, our best students in every school were always involved in some extracurricular activity. Where does that fit in? What are we doing
That's actually great. I mean, that could be one of those bubbles, so that's huge, because I'm a huge proponent of it, whether it's fine arts or whether it's athletics. When a kid feels comfortable and they have a home and they believe in something, guess what? They're going to learn. And they're going to go to algebra class just so they can go be on the basketball court. And so you've got to find those places. Hence why we're building some of these academies that are building a home, a belonging for these children that have nothing else in this world, nothing else. And so that's actually huge, because I firmly believe in extracurriculars on both sides.
And it's not cost prohibitive to
No.
those families. And I think that's important
And that's
too.
what
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
seen change a lot since I've been on the board. There's a lot more support from the district for making sure that it is not exclusive to those that can afford it.
Yep, it goes back to every time I go, who pays for it?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to exclude somebody because of the fact that you don't have access, you don't have equality because of that might be a factor.
When I think about like the AP test, for example,
Mhm.
right? That's not equitable if student A can take the class and afford to pay for the exam at the end of the class, but student B, who took the class, did well but can't afford the test. Yeah, we definitely have to
Sounds like
remove
you were
all
in
of
my
those
meeting
barriers.
yesterday, right? Lance, you heard me go through all that list.
That's exactly right. And you've heard me say this in a lot of the public speaking places I've been, you pay now or you pay later.
There you
This
go.
is what it all is.
Mr. Bocci?
So I might add that maybe one of the circles, or it could be a piece in all of these circles, is actually our transportation. I mean, because we have so many great programs, but if parents don't have the means to transport the kids to that school, then it becomes an access
And we do that.
thing.
We do the worst.
Not, I mean, not for everything. I mean, I know, I won't say, I mean, I'm pretty sure LEAP gets gets transportation. But, I will personally guarantee you, IB doesn't get transportation. But if any of these, parents want to go to a different neighborhood school or a different high school for a different academy, if they can't transport, what are those options? I mean, it says on our transfer requests, you have to provide transportation.
Yes,
So
you're
I would,
referring to the academies themselves.
I would say that's something that we evaluate at some point, because that takes away choices for some of our kids.
And we're working on a whole new plan there on having regional academies as well. So I'm trying to put some of that into place. And not just taking an awesome name and sticking it on a marquee and said, hey, we're this. And it shows nothing other than every other state of Texas school has, called camp, computers, music, art, and PE. I spelled camp wrong just then, but you know what I'm getting at. When they have that and moving that forward. And so really honing in on what are those quadrants that we're looking at and how can we make sure we're reaching all students. And then if it becomes a transportation issue, at least it's not all the way across town. It's not moving from the west side to the east side or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I just think that's something that could be, part of the discussion for, longer term. That's not anything that's going to be solved. And honestly, we can't provide enough buses to do it anyway. I totally acknowledge that. But there's got to be something to look at, because I do believe it takes away the choice from some of our families if they have to provide transportation.
And that's my issue. And you've heard me state this before, where if I'm going to Ranchview, and I want to do dual credit, well, I can't. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. So why? Everything's piled in at Turner. Why? What are we doing to reach out and then hone in on these are the expectations for this if you want to go to that campus, and then spread those out in a quadrant, just like we're doing special ed as we speak right now. Right. Walking through some of that. Hence why, too, we're putting in, the P-Techs at the Ranch, the IT P-Techs at Ranchview, and culinary arts and some of those pieces. That way you don't have to go to Smith if you want to still stay here. So sometimes you have to bring it to them in that process to make it work. And so I get what you're saying, yeah. But you're right. I mean, that could be an issue that we need to solve.
Well, and I don't think it should be sent a value for everything, but if we find a group or a group that's wanting to do this at one, maybe that's where you focus that, that analysis. I mean, I'm not saying you should provide, we should pay for a bus, for one student to participate in a program. Let's look at an alternative way. Can we do it, some other? But I just think that choice needs to be there.
Yeah. And that's how some of these new programs were developed. Code to the Future at Davis and La Villita.
They were asked.
They came from people. It didn't come from John Chapter thought this was the greatest idea ever. It came from our people. Why do you think we put in ACE in STEAM at Landry? That's what the people were asking whenever I'm going out there talking to them. What is it that we need? Hence why Joe's working so hard on P-Tech IT at Ranchview. People are wanting those things. So also looking at that culture and that individual group, because they're all different. All different quadrants are different people, different mindsets, different thoughts. It's not one size fits all as well. So how are we going about that to move to make sure we're meeting those needs by that culture itself? So agree.
One challenge you can't overcome is the Dallas promise, because
I'm working on
County,
it. I'm working on it.
that's so you're working on it,
Just
because that's something that's pretty geographic.
Yeah, it is.
But that is something that's a benefit to our students that are able to capitalize on it.
It's coming.
I want to ask about the significant disproportion, team 1 and 2. The first question is, what's the difference between 1 and 2? And then I guess, can we ask all the questions?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
The difference between 1 and 2 is because we have 2 years worth of work that we need to do to close some gaps on some disproportionality with discipline. And so there was already a group that was team 1 that was working on that. And then we have the second round that we need to work on. So the two groups are going to combine, but what we're doing is we're taking all of the work of the group one, and then we're taking all those folks, we're adding more people to the conversation so that we can get a bigger look. We're going to do a root cause analysis with our data to look at where that gap is and why. And then those two groups are going to work together to close the gaps.
Can you speak
It's
more about the gap?
It's discipline
Okay,
and African American special education.
okay. And can you tell me, so it's a state finding, right? There's a state accountability system for this? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so we've had 2 years worth of findings on that? And is there, like, what's the expectation from the state when they have a finding? What do they come back and tell us as a district that needs to be done?
They tell us that we need to fix it, and then they make you put together plans and send it in to them so that you fix it. And there's a financial piece of that, because they say that you have to spend money towards fixing it.
They dictate how much money you have to spend towards the efforts that you're doing? Okay.
Even if you need to or not, I mean, even if you need to do
Right.
something, but even if you
Right.
don't need.
Correct.
Got it.
But
And
believe
so
me, the thing that with this group two that's gonna do, we're gonna do a deeper root cause analysis than what was done previously. And it goes back to what Dr. Chapman was saying earlier about people just sending kids out of the room. We know that we need to support our teachers, and we want our students to behave and be successful in the room. So we know we want to support our teachers, but we also know that we can't send kids home, and so that's what the restorative practices piece is, and that's why there's a training all along that continuum, because we've got to close that gap.
So,
And I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I said about just sending home. All kids should have consequences for bad behavior.
Yes.
Let me just be very clear with that. But it may not be sending them home for 3 days, because guess what they're gonna do? They like to go home, and so they're gonna screw up, so they can go home again. And so there's a middle ground, there's in-school suspension, there's other rehabilitation, not a great word, to use for that. So I don't want people to think, he just wants them to misbehave and just stay in class. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
so the reason that we had the second year, is that because whatever practices we did change or whatever we did wasn't to the state standards?
No, it was because the data was lagging data, and it got CFBISD this first year, and then we're just getting ready. In fact, right when I got here, they were like, we're working on our first year, and then just like a month ago, we got hit with the second round on lagging data. So the two are very close together. Really, the work from one hadn't really been able to make any impact yet, and boom, here it came again.
And that was one of my arguments with the state, and I've seen this in a number of places, is that exactly what she's saying. So you put together a committee, you're developing, and then sometimes when you put together a plan, it doesn't happen overnight. Well, all of a sudden, months later, you get hit again, you're like, we haven't implemented the plan that you just approved the other day, and so now you've got this moving.
Do they have to approve the plan that we come up with?
Yeah.
Okay, got it, part of implementation. So the dollars that you were referring to, those are dollars that are already in our budget. It's not like we're getting money to do this work. We're having to take dollars out of our current budget in order to address the disproportionality that was found. Okay.
Amount defined by the state.
It's a percentage.
A percentage of what? The number of students that were affected, or the number of students?
Percentage of our budget.
Of our budget, okay.
Mr. Rollins?
Okay, so I got a couple things of what she's saying, so I just want to be clear about this. So does this mean, because it doesn't say this, does this mean disproportionate discipline amongst African American students in our district?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it between African American and others?
And other,
Oh, yeah,
Other
in
ethnic
other
groups in our-
groups, right.
Yeah,
That-
other
Yes.
groups.
okay. And there that's 2 years.
With that data that came, like I said, really close.
Does each, am I allowed to speak? I feel like I'm out of turn. Speak, okay. Does each sub-pop fall into like a category? So like this is African American, does Hispanic have their own and every
Right.
type, okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it. And this is
How long
gen
does
ed?
that data lag? 2 years?
Like
2 or 3 year lag? Yeah, so this isn't like this year's data, this is years back data. That's kind of-
Before you were here, possibly.
Well, could be. But I want to be clear, it's kind of getting excited, and I want to just make sure this isn't just like yesterday's
Right.
data
No,
that we're trying to fix and trying to get through this, get it done.
And the
It's
goal would be
bringing a lot-
that this would all work towards that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited about, is that the conversations and the work of just those two teams and working together, that it's bringing us to where we're gonna, we're that deep dive on data. And an example of what we've talked about, what I've talked about with the chiefs and assistant superintendents, is that at our campuses and those teams that I talked about earlier with campus administration and others, it's important that the campuses are able to be react to this. And so as a high school principal, every week we're running the data, and this will be part of the data-driven instruction that the chiefs will help to lead, is that every week the data will be run, and not run for them. We have a system now, and they're going to be able to pull their data, and they're going to look at discipline by student and discipline by teacher. And it's not to be punitive for anybody. It's because sometimes when you look at it by teacher, you figure out this teacher needs support in some way. They need some sort of resource. They need training. Maybe they're just having a really bad time in their family right now. And so you look at it by teacher for that reason, but you look at it by student for the same things that we were talking about. Sometimes it's food insecurity. Sometimes they're not making it to school. We need an alarm clock, and they need shoes, and they're mad, and they come to school that way. So when we look at the data and you look at it and you pull it on it, we now have a system to do that. When you pull it on a weekly data, those administrators can launch into action and get the supports that they need, and which we have a lot of those. We have communities in schools, we have AVID, we have just all of these circles. But until you get the data and you know who you're talking about, it's hard to get the services to them that quickly.
What's the software called? Like what's this
On
program?
Data Suite.
Okay, and is it specific to discipline, or is it do other
No,
things too?
it's specific. I'm so excited about it. It's specific to a lot of things, and that's back to what you were talking about with your dashboard. We're going to be able to look at a lot of things and be able to put a dashboard together for the board.
On Data Suite.
I'll put that tomorrow's memo.
Well, I heard for as health and extracurricular activities for bubble items, and I think that this has been helpful. Any more questions or discussion?
I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's a tough talk.
And an important one, though.
It is.
Thank you. Ready to move to the next one? Okay. Item number 4, items for discussion and/or action. 4A is review of GKD local policy regarding turf fields and community use. Dr. Chapman?
Yes, ma'am. So you have 2 paperclip documents in front of you. One of them at the very top says turf field usage survey. And so we surveyed area district or nearby districts, and this is what they're doing with their turf fields. And then on the other piece is the actual our GKD local policy, and then there's a little folded document there, and that just gives you a little snippet of what some districts do when they add into GKD local facilities not available. So there's 2 pieces. When you go back to the turf field usage survey, behind it you have a number of documents. You have Creek Views number 1, that's the existing condition, meaning the existing fencing that we have today. The second sheet is the addition of fencing for the turf fields. So you can see that running alongside that driveway, and then Ranch View is exactly the same. You see the existing, and then you see the addition. So the question that we're asking, we need guidance on, is does the board, A, want to fence the new turf fields? Now, your softball and baseball is already fenced. I mean, you just fence baseball and softball. Your turf field is not fenced. A, do you want to fence it? Do you want to do the drawings that are as presented? And then 2, do you want to be able to allow community use on those turf fields? And so we just truly need guidance from the board to how we move forward.
You said 1, I'm sorry, repeat 1, 2, what that you're looking for. 1 was?
1 is do we put a fence?
Okay.
So with those drawings, do we put the fences as and we can draw the fence however you want. This is what Malcolm and I guess Hellas proposed in that drawing. 2, then do we allow that use? Do we rent, so to speak, those turf fields? And then 3, do we change policy, GKD local, for that?
Thank you.
And we need guidance, but we did survey. The one thing that I asked is, what are districts around us doing? What are they not doing? So you
Can I
kind of
ask
get
a clarification?
Sure.
What is turf?
Authentic turf. So the
Is it
millions of
only the fake grass, or does it include
fake
all fields?
the fake grass. We're just referring to
Turf.
Creek View and Ranch View new artificial turf at
Okay,
those
so when
two
you say,
campuses.
do you allow the community to use your turf fields, I was struggling with what is
Yeah,
that
artificial
reference?
grass
Okay.
on
so
the
only-
2 football fields at Creek View and at Ranch View.
Because Smith and Turner are already enclosed football fields? I think?
Well, there's a whole new project that we're still working on with that piece.
Okay.
And so that final design and plan, it doesn't exist. So we're working on those, but these are final. The turf are done, softball, baseball, and
Yeah.
competitive field.
But the turf football fields that we've put in at Smith and Turner, they already had an
Yeah, they
existing
have a fence
chain,
around it.
so
Oh,
they're,
yes, yes.
they're
They have a
already,
fence around it right now.
their turf and track is already closed
Oh, yes.
off. Okay, that's what, yeah, thanks.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
And the others are to be determined.
And the others are open. So if you go to Creek View and you drive around there, it's open right now. If you go to Ranch View and you drive up the main drive to the right, it's open. So it's up to the board on what you decide you want to do.
So, Mr. Matthews?
The more people that have access to those turf fields, the shorter lifespan those turf fields are gonna have. I say fence them up, lock them up. That's
Mr.
it.
Barczyk?
And board members might remember when we first had a work study on this, I was pretty strong at that time where I thought the community should still have access to the track, and mainly to the track, maybe not to the turf fields. And, I took some time, did research, talked to folks, talked to coaches, and, what I learned was disappointing, the amount of damage that occurs to our existing tracks, forget the turf piece of it, but to our tracks, our tennis courts, the grass fields, by wear and tear, people ignoring signs, and it is unfortunate. It is
You're absolutely right. The
unfortunate.
community doesn't take ownership in the field. They say, I'm a taxpayer, that's fine and dandy.
And I get it, the taxpayer, our facilities belong, but our schools aren't open free for use, our
Right.
libraries aren't open free for use, our rec centers aren't open free for use that are, also taxpayers. And it's unfortunate to that, and I'm talking to the point of people cutting the fences to get into our batting cages, into our tennis courts, to use them. And I'm not willing to risk our new investment for wide open use. Now, and we could talk about the policy, on rental of those. That's a different, because that's more controllable, I think. but I'm opposed to leaving these wide open 24 hours a day for access. And I'm devastated to say that. If I had the desire to walk on the track, I mean, I might walk on, our tracks. I don't, but I know people do. So.
I also think that, especially with the football turf, we're not even 100% sure how much new use it's going to get in turf, because we're talking about having middle school games there as part of the feeder pattern development and athletic programs and all that. And
we, the district, are gonna use those fields
right.
enough.
Yeah,
Okay, we don't need anybody else joining us in that endeavor.
yeah. So I would concur with what both of you said, and both the reasons why, that I think we're probably needing to fence, and initially at least, until we know better about how all of it play out, plan for it not to be accessible other than through possible rental.
Yes.
Well, I guess I disagree. I do like the idea of them being fenced off. But one of the things I do is I play quite a bit of soccer still at J.J. Pierce. And they open them up in the mornings and they close them in the afternoons, in the evenings. I do think it's important for the community to be able to use them during normal hours on the weekends or in the evenings, to be able to feel like when they're the ones paying for it, it'll be that much easier. And I get where you're coming from, John, but I think it's getting them to feel more involved and feel more that they have that ability to use it, especially during normal hours. The time's going to come again that we need another bond, and I think it'll be easier to get people to.
So is J.J. Pierce turf?
Yeah, it's turf.
Just checking. I
It's
want to make
turf.
sure I'm picturing it right.
It's artificial turf, and
Okay.
and there's someone there that opens it up. I think it's 6 or 5 a.m. on the weekends, and they close it at 8 o'clock or 9
Is it
o'clock.
also used for a game field for
Yes,
sub-varsity?
I believe so, because they kick us off the fields during football season. So we play from about 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock, because they kick us off during football season. But, I mean, I don't know if that's something you've thought about doing, is actually putting the fence and then opening them up in the morning and closing them up in the evening.
Yeah, that's why we're meeting, just to see what the board's choice. I've been in districts where lock her up, nobody's in, you can look from the outside, and we've had some, you can use it during specific times of the day. And so that's why I just wanted to give you some information on what districts are doing and where do we want to go before we start to really unleash this, so to speak. So, yeah.
The challenge in that becomes staffing, because, and it's cool that they've got the ability to do that, but they must have a staff person who's doing the opening, doing the closing, and I assume would be there to keep up with it and, while it's being used.
It's security, it opens
I
up
think
and runs
in
around.
Mr. Monroe's got some technology like they do at houses now, where you can unlock the house from
Yeah,
your office.
yeah.
We're not that far yet. We're working on it.
That would be awesome. I see it all going on here tonight.
Yeah, we're not.
I need to chime in.
Well, and I need to chime in too, and I'm going to be very opinionated, so would you like to go before or after me?
Yes, I think I'd like to go now. I agree with John and Tara in that it is taxpayer dollars being used to build these fields, but at the same time, we need to be responsible with those taxpayer dollars, in that the increased usage increases the likelihood of us spending more tax dollars to fix them, replace them. So I feel like in order to be responsible about these weren't cheap by any means, to be, just careful with the product that we have, because unfortunately, I think people are reckless and do damage, and we don't need to be dropping more money to fix these fields in 6 months because someone wore the wrong type of shoes out on something and ruined it. So
You
I
put
think,
new carpet in your house, and only your family gets to walk on that carpet. The carpet's gonna last you a long time. If you open your front and back door and let all people in your neighborhood use that to walk, a shortcut to get from point A to point B, and everybody walks through that carpet's not gonna last very long. This is basically what we're talking about. We've got carpet on those fields.
The difference is you pay for it yourself, for that carpet in your home. You don't ask your neighbors to.
And I,
But the neighbors don't have ownership in that carpet as much as I do.
Well, and when we first had the discussion about doing this for our students, I wanted to do it to allow the students more time to play the sports and the access to the fields and not getting rained out and then kept off the fields because the fields were wet. So it was very important to me to provide part of that equity and equality and how much importance athletics has to do this. But to spend the money we spent, and I asked for the numbers, there's 180 kids doing soccer and football at Creekview. There's 120 at Rangeview total. And then to look at the impact and the amount of wear from a couple of teams playing, which I saw at Creekview when it was wide open, we didn't get a huge wear and tear on the grass fields that we had. But I've heard like that Creekview doesn't use the track they have now, and that was what was real important to me. I've watched people walk at Long, and I've watched Long get fenced off to all the people that walk there. I watched people at Blaylock get excluded from using any of Blaylock. I watched the fields behind Creekview get fenced up to the back of curb. There's nowhere for the kids to walk. They're coming from the neighborhoods to the west to Creekview because the fence is up against the road. So the kids have to walk down the road to get to Creekview. So there's just, to me, it almost makes a prison look. I drove past Rangeview on the way here. You can't even find the football field when you're driving by, but I understand that, I will consider fencing turf fields. I resent the look and the prison mentality of the enclosures around everything we've got. And what I will also bring up as I was sitting here tonight, I remembered that when the city of Carrollton allowed the school district to put fiber in the city right away, part of the agreement was that the schools would allow, the elementary schools in particular, to be, and John may remember some of this, that they would allow the elementary schools at least, and I don't remember what else, to be used for kindergarten through middle school soccer practices. Well, what has changed a lot is there just aren't that many teams playing on our elementary school fields anymore, wrecked, because there's just a diminishing population of the kids that have that opportunity. So I think it is important to focus on sports. I see the continuing closure of our properties to people. On the surface, I don't mind fencing the fields to be able to control them. I'm sad that the tracks are all going away. I worry when I see Dr. Chapman's office and the people walking at Perry, it's women walking while their kids are there practicing or whatever they're doing. And not to generalize that it's women, but generally it's been women pushing strollers and things. And I want to allow the community to still have something to do. I haven't been to the gym since COVID because it's too dangerous. So we're all pretty limited in what we can do. I know we've had people try to play cricket on our fields, and I just think that there is some real value to goodwill in trying to at least meet the community part way in some of what we're doing rather than just lock it all up, protect it all from everybody because nobody's good enough, and we're going to protect everything. And it's like having really expensive clothes or jewelry that you will never wear and you die and it's just still there. So I just think that the use, I watched at Stanbridge when we put it in the first time, then we put it in the field the second time. It requires maintenance, I know, and I think that a lot of the maintenance is required due to the sunlight, but Dr. Chapman probably knows a whole lot more than I know about those things. I used to see all the rubber pellets come home in the band shoes, but I don't know. If our community is damaging stuff, they need to be run off. We need proper security. I will say I am probably comfortable with some of the fencing of our turf, now that I have the right term. But I wish we could open up Blaylock or Long or things that we've gone and closed off to everybody. And the fields behind Creekview that we closed off for the safety of the players, now that they do have someplace safe to play. But I wish there was some way to show some grace and some compassion to the public and allow some usage under certain conditions rather than just say, it's mine, you can't have it, mentality. Ms. Hrabacek?
And like I said before, it's not, the entire community, but there's isolated, I hate to say, lock it up and shut everybody out, but even an open use or, an available time, then you have your head, your campus athletic director, your head coach out scraping gum off of the track that people have dropped during those times. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we deal with stuff every day where we're penalized because even though we're doing it right, somebody else is doing it wrong, and we get penalized by having to do extra steps. And that's kind of where we are, I think. And it's unfortunate that people won't take care of what they're given the privilege to use and open. And that's what makes me sad, that I don't want these investments in these beautiful facilities that are for our students, for our students to improve their performance and increase playtime, damaged or taken offline for maintenance to where they can't use it and benefit for it. And that's where this is a complete 180 from where I was before, but I just had those conversations, and this is where it is.
I'm probably a little more old school than most of y'all, maybe because I'm probably older than all of you, but that's beside the point. But when I was the head coach at D. Perry for a long time, I used to water my own fields. I had to go after practice to go home, and I had to take these 30-foot sections of pipe out and put them on the field, and then go back and change them 2 or 3 times before the night was over, just so the water would fill. And then on the weekends, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I happened to live not too far from there. I'd drive by there 3 or 4 times a day, and there'd be people, usually young men, playing, football on my game field. And the athletic director at the time said, had signs, closed to outside use, whatever. But they didn't care. And I'd go out and I'd have to run them off every weekend. And a lot of times, in case I was out of town or something to come back, there'd be like beer bottles and cans laying all over by the fences on the inside. I mean, it just really put a bad taste in my mouth about letting the public just get out there and mess up what I've been trying to work hard on to maintain. And
Dr. Chapman, what have you seen done in your previous districts?
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah, I want to.
They've all been locked up, every one of them. Just like what you see here in the summaries, every one of them. And I didn't make the decision, the board's made the decision, it's their community. I've never been in a district where it was open, ever. Now
The
we did
turf,
have,
what about the other non-turf amenities? Fences everywhere?
no, oh no.
By locked up, you mean locked up all the time?
No, so it was very similar to these, but you couldn't just go do it, you had to rent it. So it wasn't just free and open, very similar to what you see in all these schools. The only one that doesn't is Capel. Well, the city pays for half of it, so half the turf. So no, there are opportunities for a rental. It was never available during the school year. So if it's during football, if it's during soccer, had a huge soccer program 2 districts ago, you just couldn't use it. I mean, it was always being used. And so rotating even band and other things, it couldn't. So they allowed that in the summer months, and they allowed Pee Wee. And so what they would do is 60% of your kids, CFBers, were part of that, then you could rent it, but then there had to be a CFB employee there that entire time monitoring to make sure that it's being well kept. So we've done that, but we would open it up for such. And then there was some where you were not allowed to walk the track. Somebody would be there, on the field, but you could walk the track. And so they would have certain times a day. That was another district, and you could walk that track during those specific times. So they're all different, but I will say when it comes to the turf field, I've never been in a district where it was allowed. Just free use whenever you wanted to. We had other fields all around, but we didn't fence, I don't know, we didn't fence everything off, so I'm not.
And I want to clarify that I think, in getting into the policy, just like we would do with our building facilities, I mean, rental of those facilities where there's a contract, I mean, they're responsible for how it's left, it set the policy, says how they have to leave it and damage. I mean, that's the control factor. And so that's where you get into where it is open to people, where you have an agreement and you rent it, just like you would rent, McKinnish softball field or McKinnish, soccer, any of those fields from the city. And I don't know about Farmers Branch, and Carrollton, we have to rent the fields to play on.
Yeah, and most baseball programs, you gotta rent it, or you gotta pay for the weekend. If you're doing summer, trust me, as a parent, you pay a whole lot of money every weekend to go play on these different fields. And they have a supervisor there, and they're maintaining it. There's one in each dugout, at least where I am, or my son used to play. But that's what I've seen, yes. So we really need to get back to, because what we need to do at the December meeting, we need to decide whether because we're on hold, we're about a month behind on the chain link. So do you like where that drawing is for the new chain link fence? I think that's what we need to hit first, because then I can bring back policy ideas and thoughts that y'all can ponder again and go through. But what do you think about the Creekview new chain link fence that's going from the soccer fields, curving around the drive, and then attaching by the walkway, and then going across to the baseball dugout? That's one. And then the other one is the ranch view that just shoots straight across the parallel with the field and attaches to the left field of or almost center field of baseball. And then you can see it jogging out in front of, to the right of baseball, going around the indoor and attaching back by the church. Those are the designs that were proposed.
So can you explain on the pedestrian access what the yellow on Creekview is versus the green?
Yeah, Malcolm, could you do that? Could you address the pedestrian, basically walkways, easements on each of these in yellow?
Yes, sir. We have two options there. The one is to do a staggered gate so that, we can allow pedestrians free flow through if that's what the board chooses, or we can put a pedestrian gate in. Same with the vehicle gates. We could do a simple bar across to stop vehicle traffic, or we can do a full gate to stop, completely close off that. And that's just some of the guidance that we're looking for this evening.
Yeah, so we're just talking about just a bar so people can walk through, or do you have to have a chain link gate? That way people can't just walk under it or over it.
Yes.
And I would just say against the back of curb is really bad because there are people walking back there, and I guess they can walk up against the building through there, but on the part that runs east-west, that fence is back up against the back of curb, and there's nowhere for pedestrian traffic.
Correct. And the existing, there's actually a vehicle barrier there, and we'll put a gravel strip in to avoid any maintenance issues.
Yeah, so we don't have to, so they can walk as well as you don't have to maintain it with mowing and weeding.
So where they walk on how wide is the gravel?
But there'll be, where we're putting our fence is actually a walkway on the school side of the property. So unless we remove that vehicle barrier and rebuild it, no one walks on that side of where we're building our fence. However, when you get down to that low area where the existing fence is, you're absolutely right. It is tight back of curve there. But that area is not in the scope of this project at this time.
And I don't know, so it's just some distance from the curb?
Correct. Again, because of that existing vehicle barrier, which is already causing people have to go in there and weed eat around it. So we'll go just a foot past that with the fence, and then 8 inches past that up to that slope, and then put an edge in there.
Yeah, I guess I just can't picture where people walk there.
But that will be on the school side of the road there. There is no walkway because of the vehicle barrier that's existing. There's no pedestrian traffic along that edge.
Is there a sidewalk on the school side?
On the school side, yes, ma'am.
Because I'm having a hard time picturing it, so.
It goes right past that, there's a portable building down there.
Yeah.
It runs right along, it feeds back into the cafeteria along that area.
Okay.
61 to nothing.
Ms. Klein?
Yes, Mr. Jackson?
Malcolm, is there any thought or concern? Obviously, we're not talking about fencing on the backside of the Creekview property. I don't know, that little ravine and the creek and are there any concerns or issues that, we end up with Ranch View basically with fencing all the way around the facility, and here it's sort of like there's 200 or 300 yards of just open.
Yeah, so
No, we
he's
got
asking about,
big-
can we talk through this?
We got $1 million fence that goes around the property line, in Creek,
Okay,
all the way up from
Can you just not
so it's
see
just
them?
not shown.
Yes,
No.
yes, so the property on the other side of the fence, our entire property is fenced at that point. So the property on the other side of the creek is also fenced. There are some pedestrian walkways there. We're creating a bit of a maintenance nightmare going down into that creek to try and put a fence in. So by running our fence down into the creek where the bush grows pretty thick, we don't feel like folks will be hiking through the creek. At that point, they can jump the fence. I mean,
The creek's not really traversable either.
it's not impenetrable, but we think that this is the best result for the campus.
I do have friends that ran into a rattlesnake in that creek area last week.
I'll pass.
About 3 feet long.
Yeah.
I would ask if we still need to fence the non-turf fields that are out there.
We're not fencing on turf.
No, but these,
Oh, the old soccer fields, also taking the fence down?
just on here and there.
The board, if that's what the board wants to do, is take down the fences, we can take down fences.
Does the principal have any opinions, Mr. Malone?
We've heard similar things from the coaches, as well as that concern about use of the fields outside of time without supervision. So
I just asked about the principal.
the principal themselves, not direct feedback, I haven't heard anything from them.
I'd be more interested in what the coaches have to say personally. Because they're the ones that's their place. That's where they work.
It's a classroom.
That's their classroom.
So tonight, we're asking for, or we're being asked to make a decision on the pedestrian here.
Yes, so the two drawings, we're asking if that is legit. There's already an agenda item in December for the chain link, but we gotta finalize all of those pieces. And then two, really is, do you want me to start working up some GKD local guidelines for rental or stay off our fields, et cetera? That's really what I need the most.
To expedite things, board colleagues, what if we ask, do we need this in a motion as an action item, or can we
I
simply
think it's just
instruct?
conversation.
Yeah. That we have them put together their best estimate for what would be most effective between coach and campus information about the access gate, rather than us trying to sit here and I'd rather see them give us a recommendation and then put that into the proposal, and then bring us a proposal that has all of the new fences as being proposed, and we can then make a decision to back up from that or whatever, but it will all be in place. In addition to that, then, what if we also request that you put together some recommendations? You've heard the general discussion, and so put together some recommendations that would be possible for us to include into the policy guidance.
So the fencing, that is the recommendation. We spent
Right.
about 3 months on this. That is the full recommendation.
Right, so-
And the chain link is the full recommendation.
Right.
If you decided to put a fence and then let access, then that's when you'd put a bar. But what is here is the actual recommendation itself.
Okay, so then, And that on the December agenda, we'll be approving expenditure for
Yes,
that?
sir.
Okay, so.
But I don't even want to put it on the agenda if you're not even considering, you want to leave it open, then we need to stop spending some agenda time on it.
It feels to me like the consensus is that we want it closed. Then the question becomes, how much, if any, access do we want? And again, I think I hear consensus that rental is at least what we'd like to take a look at. So we're going to have a proposal for all. Go ahead and make as part of that, whatever is the best recommendation for gate access. And then bring the policy recommendations that would accommodate.
Yeah,
Is
right.
But I'm in complete agreement, and while I don't spend as much time, except at the Creekview baseball, so I don't know how traffic works over there. I'm more familiar with the traffic and the plans at Rangeview. And if y'all are comfortable, I mean, I'd like to have those conversations just away from tonight with Dr. Chapman and Mr. Mulroney on my likes and dislikes, and to recommend something different on the Ranchview site, unless y'all want me to go through them here. I'm happy to do that.
Because so whatever we have, so we got to go back and get pricing on all of this. And so if that's what the board, and then whatever we can put that final, y'all just tell me what you need to do. What you
Yeah,
want to do.
well,
I don't know.
okay, so
Well, I
we'll
think
go
it's
through
obvious.
them,
Nate's
because we're
right,
gonna have to
Nate's
get
in the
this.
minority.
Well,
I'm kind of in the
I'm
minority.
okay with the green fence. I would like the black fence at Creekview that was done to protect the players from getting hurt, to be removed if the players have a nice, safe field to play on, and an indoor practice facility, et cetera. So if you're gonna fence the rest, can we take that fence down?
Does at least a portion of that fence is a part of the fenced area?
Yeah, leave that part. I'm just talking about adjacent to the road. It's just part of the field as you navigate through there. It's up against the back of curb, and it just is quite, you know, I walk from across the bridge and through Creekview sometimes to get places, and it's just kind of doesn't feel very pedestrian friendly at all.
Is that allowing, I'm just not familiar with how folks.
Well, normally you walk beside the curb, but the fence is up to the back of curb, so you have to walk in the street. And the first field that was fenced was the band field, and the band now practices on the concrete because it's really better for the band. So.
If it's a safety issue, then I want anybody walking along there to be safe. So, I mean, I've just never seen it in action before, so.
I don't see it as a safety issue.
Can we look at Rangeview? Because I drove through there just so I could be familiar with the conversation tonight. So, the proposed, can Malcolm go over that? Or you already did? So the Knox, how do you spell knock? Knox box?
Knoxbox, yep, K-N-O-T-K. No, O-K-X, sorry, K-N-O-X.
I know, I had to Google it, I was curious.
Yes, ma'am.
So that just means if you're at the street, you get out of your car and get the key out of the gate and then open.
Not anybody, it's a special fire alarm key. Fire departments have a special key for that box.
Oh, is that what that's for?
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
if there's a fire at in the indoor or something like that, they can get through.
So they have the same thing at the other end of the drive?
If that is a fire lane just of the indoor facility, so we have to provide that.
Yeah.
And the Octicom is just the fancier version of that. It works off of the frequency within the fire truck.
No, I know the Opticom, I didn't see that on here. Okay.
So my question would be, you know, that lane, whether it's supposed to be used or not, is used for buses, for visiting teams pulling up to softball and baseball. Would that be open for buses or no more, it's closed off to all vehicular?
Oh, yeah, no, it'll be open, we'll open it for buses for the activity, just like we do on most high schools. They open it up, kids go in, do the thing, they leave it open because it's supervised, you got coaches there, should have a principal on duty or an administrator. That's
Okay.
different when you're using your own facility, but then whenever you're done, you can secure it and leave.
So, are we under design guidelines for that area, for the fence around the outside of the building?
Yes, ma'am. That's why the vehicle fence that comes off the road there would need to be decorative to match the existing fence.
Right.
And same with the infill, there's that pedestrian opening, that infill would have to be decorative. We are working with the city to request a variance so that we can use a chain link that extends the baseball across to where the electrical lines are there, past the indoor facility on the other side. We feel that that is an interior fence. It does not run along the right-of-way and would match the existing fence that's there. So we feel like we have a good reason. We have not had a decision out of the town yet, though.
Okay, so that section from the walkway over to the electrical, and I'll call it the electrical fence. So
Yes.
that electrical fence, you know what I'm talking, I don't think that does, anything as far as a protection of facilities or access for
Yes.
that. I think if you, just north, south of the first baseline, where along that access road, if that were to be fenced, that's the protection and access,
Okay.
which also later on, you know, I don't know what the plan is, you know, Ranch View is wide open right now and not able to charge admission for games, and while revenue is not the sole purpose, it's been absent, and I think moving, you know, pedestrian access to there in between the concession stands and those fields, that allows that, you know, right now or in the future, you know, whatever, that opportunity, a kind of a checkpoint gate. And it truly blocks off those fields, because that decorative gate on the outside, I mean, anybody, and I see it now, people climb over it all the time, and then everything's wide open. And there are sections where you could even, I mean, I could, I'm too wide, but you could crawl under it too. But I think fencing that other, that's my recommendation.
Any discussion?
And I can draw it.
So the question is, are you looking for direction on what the policy should say that GKE?
No, I just need a fence.
Okay.
Then we'll go with the fence. I can work, I mean, I'm gonna get y'all policy on what majority of the board was thinking. And I'll give you options on what's available.
I would ask at Creekview if we could take down along the paved surfaces, the black fence, and I'm okay with the green. It still allows people to walk through and pass through the campus. I just hope when you do Perry, since and other campuses that still have people that are able to exercise there, that they still can.
Like I said, I'm fine with fencing. I'm not a fence expert. I don't know where they need to go. Relying on y'all to do that. But I do think that it should be open to the public during normal hours when there's daylight. That's my stance on it.
It's interesting if you look at what Richardson's answer was to do with Pierce.
And it's Pierce.
Yes.
No.
So Dr. Chapman, is that all clear?
No, I have no idea.
What's your question?
So we're gonna meet again and redesign fencing and pull out fencing and then move some fencing?
No, I just said Creekview, just pull that out and that, so you're asking what to do with the pedestrian and the vehicular?
No.
So what are you asking on Creekview?
I'm good. We'll bring a recommendation to the board next month.
Yeah.
Well, I will send via email my recommendations on the changes to the Ranch View fencing. And, I mean, if the pricing has already been developed, then, you know, and done per this with no additional input, then we should have seen the drawing before.
No pricing has been done. That's what we're
Well, you
gonna
just
do.
said you were gonna have to go back and get different pricing because this is the plans that had already been priced. Okay, so then we're okay. I mean, we can send recommendation, I mean, a recommended, I can draw it up and that's what'll be. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I want to make a comment.
Yes, Ms.
This
Derrick?
isn't going to be real popular, but I feel like as a board, we've lost our way when we've spent more time talking about fencing around ball fields and not student achievement. I'm just going to put that out there. We seriously just spent more time on this conversation than we did about student achievement, and I have a problem with that.
I would second that and add, it feels to me like we accidentally stepped across the line and kind of micromanaged. I think, my thought process is, get a recommendation from our athletic department that comes through our administrators, and then we say, let's go with it.
Thank you. That's
And
what,
we're here
that's
for student
half of
achievement.
that.
I mean,
From the
I
coaches.
don't really know where they need to be per se. I can think about it, but
We need to focus
So
on
far,
student
Malcolm hasn't
achievement.
done anything yet that's upset me, and whatever he got, I'm gonna trust him until he does something upset me. I'm gonna ride him like a stud hole. Okay.
So with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is consider approved edits to bond advisory council bylaws. So at their table, I brought stuff with me, so tell me what we.
Yeah, so you have, so you, yes ma'am, so you have the 1920 bond advisory, or the bond council guidelines, and then you have the 2021 recommendations developed by some of the bond advisory committee, so they're calling themselves committee. So you have their recommendation, 2021, we haven't touched any of this, and you have the original 1920 in front of you.
So, board members, I would like to kind of do a round robin and just kind of, in general, not specifically, what role do you see delegated to the bond advisory council? And then, Guillermo, you want to go first?
No.
Okay, Randy? Or do you want me to go first?
well, I thought that we appointed the bond advisory committee to help us provide monitoring to ensure that stakeholder input, which was brought to the bond program, was in fact what we were doing. I don't want to in any way imply that I think theirs is just kind of not a full-on function, but just kind of an honorarium function, because they need to be supervising, that's not a good word either. They need
I think
to be
monitoring.
that stuff. It feels like to me that somewhere in the process that there was a little bit more ownership claimed by either individuals or the group, and I think in a quick read of this, I think I like the direction that this is moving in, that it's a little bit more the direction that I think would go, and would be my thought process.
Is there?
I would comment that I think the bond advisory committee is the check and balance for the bond that was approved by the voters, so that there is a level, a middleman in there for the taxpayers who approve the bond. They're the overseer of just the whole thing in general. They're not nitpicking the day-to-day, but they're the check and balance.
Mr. Matthews?
I think any member of the bond advisory council or committee should, anybody, and this needs to be stressed, leave any personal agendas at home, just like we tell any new school board member. Don't run the school board if you have a personal agenda. Okay? We'll leave that at home. This is not about you and your personal agenda. This is about the welfare of our district.
I agree with the checks and balances terms. The bond committee is not to define details of the projects, define the projects. It's ensuring that the recommended projects are in line with the original recommendation and what the voters approved and in line cost-wise. Nothing more. No details.
And kind of the way it works now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Presentations are developed for the board monthly, and then every couple of months, the bond advisory committee meets, and they receive similar information, and they can ask all the questions they want. And so the question is, what level of responsibility does the board want to delegate to this committee, or do we just want them to monitor and report back if they see anything out of kilter? You know, what is that a good question? And then I was going to go piece by piece through the old and the new, and kind of try to walk through it. And I recognize, Sally, this may not be academics, which we care about the most, but this is kind of that community engagement to make sure that we continue to listen and then answer the community. So does that make sense? I listened to Howard Fisher when he came and spoke to us a couple of months ago, and I know that this is the follow-up from that, and they researched a number of other school districts that have similar committees to understand what they think their roles should be and try to communicate to us what they think the wording. So, y'all ready to kind of crank through the items, the differences? Or y'all want to go through, or Tara, do you have a suggestion?
Well, I mean, did everybody read them? Did they notice anything that was out of whack? I mean, I don't know if there's anything that...
Well, I kind of had fun looking up synonyms for oversight. And it's kind of, in one way, oversight almost has a negative connotation of usually it's a mistake or an accident. And then I talked to one of the bond advisory committee members, and I said, if you can come up with a different word, that would work great. So I'm just, first of all, bond advisory, I'm okay with committee, but bond oversight committee, bond advisory committee, does it matter to anybody? I came up with a bond care committee, because they care a lot, but I don't know. I was okay with bond advisory. Oversight seems like the board's delegating our responsibility for monitoring the bond and giving some power that maybe we aren't meaning to give, but I'm curious where y'all are.
I did see a negative connotation with the word, only because, I know the definition is not them having control of the bond. It's truly
Communication.
their of the community wishes.
I see them in a review capacity. That we're doing
And monitoring.
that we are doing what we said we would do, and that we are achieving the objectives that were put forward in the project.
So any suggestion on that?
For another word?
Yeah, or a word, what the title should be. I found 200 synonyms for oversight, and the first 50 were all very bad, but the second ones were better. Yeah. Supervision, surveillance, superintendents, I thought that was inspection. I just kind of, oversight seems a little heavy-handed, but, care, management, custody, command, those are all words that oversight is a synonym for, so.
I think it's more important that we focus on the
Guts.
the guts of it, rather
Okay.
than, you can call it whatever you want, but if the bottom part doesn't speak to what you actually want
Right.
to accomplish,
And
it doesn't matter what the
that was
title is.
another committee member's perspective, is they didn't care about the name, one cared about the name. So just trying to reflect what was passionate for each. So, anything in the purpose?
All of it boils down to how they intend to operate. Because, you can have all the pieces there, but you can intend to operate it as, a group that has oversight, is gonna tell us what to do with it. I don't imply that that's what they're trying to do, but that could be their choice, or it could be that they're going to be very laissez-faire about the idea, and just kind of, okay, whatever, and sort of push the same information that they've been given from the district out as their reports. So somewhere on the continuum in there is where they're going to fall.
One thing I would say is for 2.4, would receive instead of review be okay? Or do you want them reviewing them?
I would imagine they'd be expected to review it. I mean, I don't know what the purpose is, if they're just receiving information but not doing anything with it.
So, Malcolm, what's your perspective on, so once they review it, then they would give a direction to Malcolm, or would they then report to the board, or what would they do with their review?
I mean, the next line says that they provide an update to the board. I mean, the only other thing I can think of is if you want to address that there's a concern that is brought up in the review, what their next step would be with that.
Yeah.
To guide them how they would escalate a concern, but, I mean, otherwise it tells them to review it and then to provide an annual briefing to us.
Dr. Chapman, you've done a lot of these. How's that going to work?
It's just gonna be what the board decides to give up power. Are you giving up power? If they're gonna review something and give, like you were saying, give direction to us, the
They're gonna
team, we're not coming to you. We don't have to come to you anymore. We're gonna go to those 8 and we're gonna move this work forward, because you know how fast construction is, especially what we're about to get into. So it's just something the board, what you feel comfortable with. If you want them to review it and then give the priorities, because here's what's gonna happen. I've seen this too. If they go and give their opinion and they say, we're reviewing this and we want you to change X, Y, Z, we bring it to the board goes, why are you doing that?
That's
This
2
is what we're
months.
looking at. And this is what those, remember all those committees that we have that we went through last month or month before last, whenever that was, all of that, then is that stakeholders for not? So is the community taking on this? Who's reviewing, who's receiving? That's what I just gotta find your comfort level and how you wanna do it. And if you're okay with that, if I'm saying, no, change this, no, that's really what I wanna do here, here, and here, and you're good with that, then okay. But if it comes back to you in an additional approval, and you go against their recommendation, then what's the point of them reviewing? You're wasting their time. So that's where we gotta kind of figure
I
out.
really felt like they were there to be aware and be able to ask questions and monitor, and, was that your term, monitor? And be familiar, and then alert us if it wasn't what was expected from the committee that approved everything.
And the other piece too, and the conversation that's come up, is we give you all the information before they get it. So we're giving you all this every month, so we're doing a monthly update. Well, they're seeing the exact same presentation, same data, same information, maybe a month later or 2 months later, even if it's every other month. And so I know there's been some issues there, so what is our actual role and task?
Do
I
we
think that's
want
what
to
they're
wait
trying.
to see it after they've had a chance to meet and see it, or do we want to continue our monthly updates?
So is their complaint that because they're getting it after us, by that point, it's moot because the board's already acted on it or not acted on it, and it's just more of an FYI to them?
I haven't heard that personally,
Okay.
but I'm assuming that, I mean, if I were on their committee, I'm like, we're just watching the same thing we just saw last month and the month
And they
before.
can come to the school board meeting and watch it.
Right, that's my point. So are we wasting?
So what is the
unfortunately
role?
wasting-
What I wanted to do was give that direct interaction where they could ask questions, but, you know, Malcolm's available and open. But, you know, I sat on a phone call for Newman Smith where they were talking about how big to make a closet for 30 minutes, you know.
Yeah, it's a long time.
You know, and it was working through all the details for when Newman Smith goes, and renovate. So, you know, what is the role? And I think I heard Mr. Matthews say something as we went around. There is some, as we've seen tonight, personal interest in special projects. And what is that role, and how does Malcolm proceed with a lot of different, and I think the board is ultimately responsible and ultimately accountable. I think we wanted the bond advisory committee to be there to be like insurance that we haven't missed something. And I think that the timeliness, I don't have a problem with us seeing it when it's timely, but I know they're welcome to our meetings whenever they want to attend. But, you know, that's been, I think, what the challenge is how to make this feel fruitful for their time. So,
And that's why we invite them to all the stakeholder meetings. But you also got to understand, it's another piece. So the stakeholders make a decision on a closet, and then it goes back to somebody else, and then they say no. Then the stakeholders go, why did you even ask this? Why did we spend all that time whenever you just changed text? So, I don't know. It's
and there's not always consensus on what the wording in here should be. You know, so, you know, as we navigate this, you know, so, you know, one thing is what happens to the committee if somebody drops off? Does it always have to have a, where do new ones come from? I say they come from the board. And what is the term of a committee member? Does their term expire? You know, is it the length, the original agreement said the length of the term of the bond? What is that? You know, that could be 10 years. So, you know, so any ideas on how to get through this 2 pages faster?
So I'm gonna go back to 2.4 real quick. So the way this is worded, y'all aren't understanding that as just that they get the information and they're reviewing it. You feel like this gives them the ability to like act on it and tell staff.
Prioritize is my concern.
No, it doesn't say to prioritize. It says they're gonna review the priorities. Like, to me, that's stuff already completed that they're being given, and they're reading it, and they're like, okay, this seems like it matched up with what was previously recommended, we're good, continue on. Like, to me, this doesn't, there's not any action in this statement for them. It's more they're being given the information to review.
so what steps would we be taking? So if we were to approve the Perry design, until you had those 60 stakeholder meetings, and then it comes to the board, and the board blesses it, does it go to them first? After the stakeholder meeting, and they can change it, and then it comes to the board for approval? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because we got to figure out what their role is, and I'll do whatever you want me to do.
It's 20 steps before all those
Right.
stakeholders. I think that's when it was, you know, y'all have presented, we want to redo Perry, and the bond committee says, okay, they want to redo Perry, they're recommending this, is it on our original? Yep, okay, we're done. And then if they want to participate in the stakeholder, let them. I mean, that's community, that's great, but there's no direct, I would be against any direction. They can't change, say, you know what, let's not do Perry, let's go do Long, you know, or some, you know, anything like that.
I would
That's
agree
my
with that,
vision.
that they're gonna be on this at the very beginning, before it even goes to the stakeholders or to anyone else. Because what they're doing is that check and balance at that point, when the recommendation is brought up to say, okay, this is what was originally discussed in 2018, you can't move forward with that. Or say, no, wait, we never even talked about this. This was never put in the bond package. We have a problem before it gets to the stakeholder conversation, to prevent a conversation happening that was not part of the original bond.
Almost like the initiation of the next phase.
Kind of like our agenda, items for discussion, and then items for like more over the more interim or more preliminary type discussions of where something's headed. What I know of what happened on the bond program I was super active in 2003 was we would have money left over from one and we'd go chunk it on another as a board. I think that there are those things that happen where if something overruns and something else is an opportunity, if you watch HGTV, you see it all the time. But, you know, how does that work and whose job is it? Is it staff more or is this committee doing that? And You know, do we trust Malcolm, or do we need, you know, is it more he's telling them what he's planning to do? And if they want to come raise a flag to us, they do, or how does that work?
Because you're gonna have, when you get closer to the end of the bond, you're gonna probably have excess funds. I mean, we're monitoring that now. You're probably gonna have excess funds, so that, how do you move that forward? And so does that become, they get to decide and bring a recommendation to the board? Is that what?
I think the administration and, you know, you and Malcolm are more familiar with what the needs are as far as capital review and facility review, and that, you know, there's a recommendation, and, you know, you're making a recommendation to the board, we have to approve it, not looking for their approval. It's, hey, what do y'all think, you know, how does the community feel? You know, we have this money, so we are gonna, you know, build new middle school B. Well, I would hope they would say no, or we're gonna use this money and add this feature to elementary school G. And you know, it's kind of a, hey, we like that as a community representatives, and then ultimately we have the approval for that.
Because that's what we did with McWhorter. McWhorter's a prime example of the Tuesday night, and then taking that same platform, so to speak, and doing it on those other 5 elementaries. And so then we go to them and say, is this really what we want to do? So that's where you're going to have to get guidance. And I see where they just don't know what their role is, so to speak. And I get it, totally get it. I
see the role as, was it the original intent? Is it on schedule? And is it within the budget that the CAC approved? And that's it. That's my opinion.
I would agree with that.
So they're meeting on the 30th to review the bylaws that a couple of these put together for their BAC. Do you want to see what their final product is and then bring something back, or get a subgroup to work on it? Or I don't know if we're going to get anything accomplished tonight with, you know, with what's both are right here. I don't know, maybe.
Well, maybe we should just take it, you know, if there's anything in here that seems to, or read or give the perception or document that they have control to make those changes, I think that's what needs to be pulled back and removed. And that's kind of where the oversight, I think, comes in, oversight of step 1, 2, 3. Intent, schedule, money.
And it's impossible for us to talk to 80,000 constituents or even to hear from 80,000 constituents when we had a bond. So we went out and appointed about 60 people from staff and everybody to help formulate that. And then this group, in my opinion, is taking that information and is there to help continue to be the ear of the community that we reach out to first, so we can say, what do the stakeholders think? You know, are we getting it done the way we said we'd get it done? Are we getting it done, you know, in the cost levels that we proposed? And is it accomplishing the objectives?
Right.
And that's their role, I think.
So, like 4.8 says the chair, co-chair will set the meeting agenda. Is it more that they'll review the meeting agenda that Malcolm sets, or is it that they'll set the meeting agenda, you know? So just kind of.
Again, I think it's on a continuum. It's where in there, you know, from laissez-faire to ultimate control, and where do they see themselves falling on that role? I think we pretty much said we see them in an advisory role, reviewing and being an ear from the community. You know, and if they want to then be able to say, no, we want those panels to be red, not blue, that's not what we're, that's not what
You're
we're.
talking about having a conversation 30 minutes over a closet?
Well, that was a meeting that Malcolm had to do with Women's
Yeah,
Minute.
yeah.
It was a
There's got to be
different
some sort of,
No, there's more, yeah.
Well, this would almost be the same agenda, I think, every meeting, that it's, you know, reviewing
What's the latest?
the progress, which we see as well. You know, is there any sort of development towards the next phase of the projects? That, review the schedule, review where costs are, and I mean, that's kind of it, right?
And I think this reflects some of our most interested and committed citizenry, and how do we arm them with all the information they desire, but also not delegate responsibilities that may be board responsibilities, so.
Or pick apart their recommendation for
Right.
this. I mean, I do feel like they took the time to create this document, and to me, it's very thoughtfully done. It doesn't have an overwhelming feeling of they're trying to take over everything. So I do think we need to be, cognizant of the fact that if we go and pick this apart, that's not really giving a very good impression back to them about our trust in their ability.
One clarifying question, because this is huge, is 4.1.
Yeah.
When you talk about TIF fund project, that's limited. When you talk about projects funded, proposal funded by district operation, guys, that's millions of dollars of stuff, all that, like this fence, for example.
And legally, we are responsible
You're
for
100%.
that. Whether they make the decision, we're on the hook.
Right, so I just want to get clarification. If that's what we do, then we need to be meeting them every 2 weeks, not every other month. Are we just referring to bond funds and TIF funds? It's whatever, but
It's a bond committee, so I think that's where, or post-bond committee, sorry. That's where I think the effort should focus. I think those others is just an awareness of what else is happening, but I think you can get that same awareness from our board meetings and the construction updates that Malcolm provides, because they're very thorough. So I think, and that information is on the website. So,
Any other comments?
what's your ask?
I'm gonna look at the agenda and see what it says. Consider approve edits to bond advisory council bylaws. So they're meeting on the 30th?
I believe so. Is that correct, Malcolm? Yeah.
So what are they meeting on the 30th to do?
To, I guess, approve the bylaws.
So they're gonna discuss these again?
Yeah, so the whole committee, I don't believe,
Okay.
edited these. I think it was a couple.
So how about we just say we considered them and it's something that could come back because we don't know what the committee wants. This is just a couple. Is that safe to say? Because, so they haven't all asked to send this to us? They haven't said this is what we want and sent this to us as a committee?
They sent to you. They sent that.
Okay.
Somebody did. Mary or Catherine.
No, I know,
sent
but
that to you
as a
personally.
committee, have they approved them
No.
with
not-
their
not to my
quorum
knowledge.
and all that?
No, not to
Okay.
my knowledge.
Can
So
we
really,
assign
we
a
don't
board
have-
liaison to them for that process, so that at least someone that's at this table knows what their thinking was on all of this?
It's a good idea.
And did we provide a list of objectives or did we give them a work order that said, here's what it
Well, this is
years
kind
out?
of what it was, the old one.
Yeah, the old one was, day one, this is kind of our thoughts.
And I attended
board
this
approved
meeting.
this. Yeah. And then we gave it to them, they edited a little bit of it, and then they agreed and they signed it. Well, that was their very first rattle out the box. And so now they're going, what is our actual role? Because then they see all the approvals and things taking place at board meeting, and they're seeing it months later, or a month later, depending on the board meeting, their meetings.
I'd be happy to volunteer to be the liaison, so that we at least know what their conversation is regarding this, because I feel like we're having a lot of discussion on what we think they may be intending to say versus what we think. Okay, so we're okay if I reach out to them to have that conversation. Okay, I will do that.
And I think it would be just attend their next meeting. Does that work, Dr. Chapman?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else want to go?
I would like to, but I'm out of town
Okay.
on the 30th.
November 30th, not
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I may go just out of interest. So with that, that brings us to item number 4C. Consider approved superintendent compensation plan. Closed meeting C1, closed meeting is authorized under Texas Government Code, including but not limited to section 551.071, consultation with attorney, 551.072, real property, 551.074, personnel matters, 551.076, security devices, 551.082, school children, district employees, disciplinary matter or complaint, 551.0821, personally identifiable student information, 551.084, investigation. Audience members, at this time, please move into the foyer while the board goes into deliberations. The time is now 8:56 p.m. So at 10:10 p.m., we'll reconvene in an open meeting, and we're on item 4C2. Reconvene an open meeting for possible action regarding items discussed in closed meeting. Board members, is there any action you want to take? Mr. Chapman.
Mrs. Klein, the board acknowledges that we had incorrect information in front of us last meeting, and as we looked at that, what we thought we were doing relative to our superintendent salary was not what was actually planned. After considerable discussion and looking at it, we would like to amend the motion from the prior meeting. And the superintendent will be offered a contract for the coming year, extended out a year, and the salary will be $305,000.
So we have a motion by Mr. Chapman. We have a second by Mr. Bocek. All those in favor? So that is, and any opposed? So that is 5 in favor and 1 opposed. So item number 5, comments from board members regarding posted agenda items. Any other further comments? And with that, we'll adjourn this meeting at 10:12 p.m. Thank y'all.